So what I'd like to do this morning is to provide for you a little bit of the context as to why we believe today is the best time to be an innovator, and to describe a few of the tools that we have in the toolkit to move this conversation forward. I want to begin with where the president started in the 2011 State of the Union, where he called on our fellow entrepreneurs and innovators in this country to help us out-innovate, out-educate, and out-build the rest of the world. The challenge specifically on energy, as the president outlined, was to set a bold goal that by the year 2035, 80% of America's electricity will come from clean energy sources. And for the conversation that just happened, enabling infrastructure for that world demands a modernized electrical grid. So what I'd like to do is set the stage for that vision, beginning with where the president sees innovation writ large, and then to dial into the conversation on smart grid. In September of 2009, the president unveiled a strategy for American innovation, a strategy that outlined a vision for the role of government as we looked to the economic prospects of the United States, not in the immediate term, but over the medium and longer term. And that strategy has three basic parts. First, that America is at its best when we invest in the building blocks of American innovation. Now, traditionally, building blocks of innovation have been infrastructure, roadways, railways, and runways, human capital, where the president has emphasized science, technology, engineering, and mathematics as key areas of focus to grow the quality of our workforce, and research and development activities that the president has prioritized even in these difficult financial times. But underpinning this concept of building blocks is this new notion of digital infrastructure. Digital infrastructure in the healthcare sector, digital infrastructure in the energy sector, digital infrastructure in the education sector. In a sense, active ingredients of the innovation that we'll be talking about, that you have been talking about during the course of this conference. The second pillar of the president's innovation strategy is to set the right conditions, the policy conditions, to promote market-based innovation. Now here, there has been a great deal of emphasis on enabling private sector initiatives to thrive and to blossom, using the bully pulpit from Washington, what many of us call government as impatient convener. And it was the president in January that called on the entrepreneurial community to say, let's do more to have an increased ecosystem, a more successful ecosystem. You heard about plug and play, and there are others that are enabling more entrepreneurs to be successful. Increase our shots on goal and the degree to which those entrepreneurial startups become high-growth companies and succeed. So we launched Startup America, and the president challenged the private sector, which leaders like Steve Case have responded in celebrating Startup America partnership, nonprofit collaboration of all of these actors in the ecosystem to try to address that challenge. What is it that we can do to strengthen? I'll talk more about that in a minute. And then last, but certainly not least, and the basis for the discussion today, the president did outline a few of these key priorities where we need an all-hands-on-deck approach. In other words, it's one thing to celebrate in a cheerleading capacity entrepreneurial activity, the panel that talked about the investor's thesis, the opportunities for entrepreneurship and venture capital. But it's another to have a little bit more of a thoughtful connectivity, if you will, where entrepreneurs externally can plug into entrepreneurs within the public sector, because so many of the unlocked, so many of the areas of the economy that have failed to achieve the productivity gains, that have been looking for opportunities to unlock the potential, that now you need to have that symbiotic relationship. We're doing our part to increase the capacity in Washington and hopefully throughout the states and the localities to allow for that entrepreneurial community to plug in. So that all-hands-on-deck approach is really the basis upon which you'll see our thesis around smart grid. But let me just say a word about this notion of entrepreneurship. I had mentioned Startup America. Let me provide for you a quick overview for those that are not familiar with the program. In January, the president unveiled 5 very important levers to increase the again, shots on goal and the degree to which those entrepreneurs can become high-growth companies. One is to improve access to capital. Second, to strengthen and nurture and cultivate mentorship networks and support organizations, not unlike Plug and Play. So again, in the context of the Startup America Coalition, these are the activities of the private sector, I should add. Third of the private sector is what we like to call big co to new co, which is to say large corporations that start to open up their supply chain and other tools in their toolkit to encourage entrepreneurship. And you can't get much more big co in this country than utilities. So one of the challenges in Startup America Partnership in that pillar, big co to new co, is to find out how the utility sector might engage the entrepreneurial community. More on that in a moment. Just to give you an example of what we're seeing out there in terms of the Startup America Partnership activities, again, privately financed, privately organized, entirely done, no taxpayer dollars whatsoever. Blackstone Entrepreneurs Network announced that they would spend roughly $3.5 million to hire master entrepreneurs in the North Carolina region around the Research Triangle Park, and to basically dispense those entrepreneurs, or to place them in a situation where they could provide support to students, faculty, and others around the community to increase the probability of entrepreneurship. Their goal is to actually add 17,000 jobs over the next 5 years as they nurture and support these increased number of entrepreneurs. Again, they did it as a call to action. They thought this is an important priority, put the resources together, and made such announcements. There are, as of today, at startupamericapartnership.org, I think no less than 40 or maybe even 50 partnership announcements, not unlike the Blackstone message. More will come. But on my end, again, this notion of the receptacle, how do we connect the tissue? You've got 3 private sector activities: capital, mentorship, big co, new co. But you also need to have a response from, in our case, Washington, but hopefully as a model for states and localities. So the final 2 pillars of Startup America are, how do we uncover regulatory burdens that have gotten in the way of startups? So we have been going around the country on a bit of a roadshow to inventory as many of these barriers as possible. You can visit reducingbarriers.ideascale.com to share your voice in this conversation, or to vote other voices up and down. And we'll go through a process of inventorying those ideas and putting them through a review cycle, because the president called for that in an executive order he issued in January. But last and certainly not least is what gets me most excited, the part that keeps me energized and on the road, and that is to unleash market opportunities. How might policy intervention actually accelerate the business case for new opportunities? You know, it's one thing for us to encourage entrepreneurs to be successful in the world as it is. It's quite another to watch as the world starts to evolve, to see how new opportunities might emerge. And to help tell that story, we've unleashed a series of outreach programs. We're calling them DC to VC. And you can see pictured here myself and Arun Majumdar talking about a clean energy economy not too far from here. We were at Stanford. And we are reaching out in community after community to understand from the business community, what is it that's getting in the way? What is it that we can do to actually create more market momentum? How might we do a better job to increase the probability of success for these early stage companies? And again, this DC to VC model is focused on the 3 areas that Anto had described: healthcare, energy, and education. Now, let's now get into the discussion about our energy future more specifically, and talk about where we are policy-wise on smart grid. As you know, the chart on my left outlines where we see renewable energy generation over the last several years projected into 2012. And obviously the point of that graphic is that we're seeing a growth, as we would hope that to be, in the introduction of renewable sources of energy. To help us understand the impact of all this, the president released a blueprint for a secure energy future. And in that blueprint made a very specific comment that creating a market for new technologies will be central to charting a path to a clean energy future. For that reason, the administration is also advancing policies that will help to modernize the electric power grid. Again, coming straight out of the president's blueprint for a secure energy future. And to help lead this effort, we in the White House have turned to two of our favorites in this sector, George Arnold at NIST and Pat Hoffman at the Department of Energy, to co-chair a smart grid policy committee that was unveiled to the world in July of 2010. We've held over 100 stakeholder outreach meetings. We've held 3 requests for information, unprecedented levels of public input, and I'm pleased to announce that we will be culminating this work at a White House summit in June. And I'll preview the key themes likely to emerge when we unveil our overall strategy. Theme number 1, it is important for us to enable cost-effective investments, to pull from the early insights. One of the speakers earlier talked about the $4.5 billion of investment in the Recovery Act that has sort of been a catalyst for some of these new models. 140 projects to date. How do we understand the lessons learned from those prototypes, those case studies? How do we quickly identify what works and what didn't? How do we learn to fail fast, and how do we encourage the replication and the scaling of those ideas that have delivered results? And there are some really fun ones. Nettle, one of our federal labs, is doing a wind integration test program in Texas where they're measuring 3 apps: a data portal that is going to match the generation to load, synchrophaser investments for reliability, and a community test bed where they're going to see all kinds of smart appliances and other technologies plug into the ecosystem. It'll be fun to watch these projects as they evolve. And we are organizing the publication of our findings in these areas on a revised and rejuvenated smartgrid.gov, which will be our placeholder to share those lessons learned to inform all stakeholders in this process, again, about what's working and what's not. Second, a part that is near and dear to my heart, you heard, again, reference to this in the morning session. We see the opportunities to unlock the potential for innovation in this sector. And there are 2 halves to this equation. One is research and development investments through programs like ARPA-E, and the other is to ensure that we've got frictionless information sharing, information communications capabilities through our NIST public-private partnership on standards. Where are we? One of my favorites, again, you had it referenced verbally this morning. It is, in fact, one of the research projects of ARPA-E right now to shrink the 8,000-pound transformer into a suitcase-sized 100-pound mini-me with more intelligence in the system. That's a startup, by the way, GeneSiC in Northern Virginia, that has successfully been awarded that contract. One note I might make as an observation, by the way, for the investors in the room, ARPA-E has had an annual innovation summit. We've had it now twice in a row. And one of the most remarkable outcomes from that summit has been the second market, if you will, that's been emerging for investments in ARPA-E, not even awardees, but finalists. We publish and encourage and bring visibility to those who've scored well on our technical evaluations, but may not have actually made the final cut to get the grant. Well, if you're good enough to make the technical review, but maybe not have, for whatever reason, couldn't have gotten the grant, apparently a lot of the investors out there think that's a strong, validating seal of approval, and a number of those, what I would call secondary, if you will, innovators are actually securing venture capital. So I would highly encourage the investor community to pay attention to the ARPA-E Annual Investor Summit, get to know some of these applicants. Again, the spirit of ARPA-E is it inspires applications from universities, research consortia, and startups and everything in between. And by the way, we have an active solicitation called Genie right now looking for basically the equivalent of an internet router for energy. Very exciting research initiative. Applications are welcome. Please visit arpae.energy.gov for further information. In the same spirit, the governance model around the NIST public-private partnership for smart grid standards has, in fact, moved forward on the PAP-10 energy use standard, and we are engaging in a process to take that, if you will, to market. And we're excited about the prospects of now moving forward, enabling kind of the entrepreneurial spirit to take hold as these standards have achieved some degree of consensus. Third pillar, it is important for us to secure the grid. The president unveiled a strategy, a comprehensive strategy for cybersecurity just about 10 days ago. And it was important for us to note in the smart grid that critical infrastructure was the emphasis of the president's strategy. It emphasizes transparency to unleash market forces to help ensure that our critical infrastructure is, in fact, accountable for their cybersecurity. But, and this is very important in the spirit of innovation, it encourages voluntary cooperative collaboration opportunities, if you will. And it is in that spirit, this voluntary notion, that we have encouraged the private sector and especially the critical infrastructure, including utilities, to engage collaboratively with the Department of Homeland Security to share threat information and to engage in best practice sharing so that we can, in fact, strengthen our security posture. As all of us know, it is incredibly important for us to get this right as we proceed to digitize the electricity sector. By the way, it's important to also note one caveat, very, very strong emphasis on privacy. The president also unveiled the administration's commitment to a comprehensive privacy, quote-unquote, Bill of Rights that is beyond just the smart grid, but is in general terms a model that emphasizes the importance of fair information practices and encourages the community to come together with voluntary codes of conduct that can, in fact, be enforceable. So we are all over security and privacy as important policy levers as we move forward in this conversation. And the last and certainly not least of the policy levers is the notion that we believe in empowering consumers and enabling better decision making. Now, a word on this lever to give you the bias we hold coming into this conversation. It was the president's first action during his first full day in office, I guess to be more accurate. He released a memorandum on open government. Before I was appointed, he directed the unnamed chief technology officer for recommendations in 120 days to emphasize how we would make our government more transparent, more participatory, and more collaborative, clearly by taking advantage of these new tools and capabilities born in this internet era. We launched data.gov on the 120th day. Actually, that was my first full day in office, so it was my brother-in-arms, the chief information officer, who built the data.gov platform. And data.gov is a basic model allowing for the president's vision to become reality. And what that has basically done is it has enabled our federal agencies to provide machine-readable access to previously government-held data. You know, you could have asked for a report by submitting a FOIA request or downloaded a PDF file, but that's not exactly computer-friendly in the context of building a new app that harnesses that information to build new value, new products and services. So we issued a directive. One of my recommendations in this process is that we needed to shift the culture of Washington. And that culture shift, in part, was by shifting the default setting that when we released information, we would do so in machine-readable format without restriction that would impede the reuse of that data. Hundreds of citizen innovators have captured information from that data.gov platform and have built really interesting tools that you and I can use. I have 2 young children. Installing an infant car seat sucks. I stick my knee in the darn thing, and I got to squeeze the thing and stick it in. Turns out that the National Highway Traffic and Safety Administration has a database on all of the ease of implementation for every infant car seat sold in America. And oh, by the way, in that database is a geomap of all the locations in the United States that can actually help you install your car safety seat. So a citizen hacktivist built an iPhone app that allows you, it geolocates you, it tells you the nearest place to have your infant car seat installed. Wouldn't you know it? 50% of the American people poorly or inaccurately install their car seat. Now, was there a government RFP? Did we invest millions of dollars upgrading the database so we could release the darn infant car seat data? No. We made it accessible in machine-readable format at relatively no marginal cost. And entrepreneurs can have at it. Over 100,000 data sets are freely available for anyone to use on data.gov. A number of them, by the way, in the energy domain. It turns out that when you look at the smart grid case studies, the investments that we made as part of the Recovery Act, a great number of them have been built on the thesis of empowerment. And in fact, early suggestions indicate these have had a material effect, and frankly, could be a whole new basis of conversation to compete on the behavioral effects of information to inform better decision making. Grants in Texas and Massachusetts and other communities are enhancing open access to this data to create a thriving market for new products and services. As a result, it is our hope that we will see more of this activity, and why today I'm issuing the following challenge to industry. How might we safely and securely provide customers electronic access to their energy information, thereby supporting the continuing development of innovative new products and services in the energy sector? A question to those of you in the audience. And to make this feel real, I will further that challenge by describing for you how and where you might put this idea to work. Yesterday, Secretaries Chu and Duncan unveiled America's Home Energy Education Challenge, tapping into the brain power of our kids. 3rd to 8th graders this fall will go home, ask mom and dad if they can have electronic copies of their energy bill, because they would like their school to be the most energy efficient school in the country. And they will spend the next several weeks and months thinking about ways in which they can be more energy efficient, empowered with that information. How many of you in this country, utilities, entrepreneurs, and others, will support our 3rd to 8th graders, making it easier for them to win this contest? Where do you live? Will your kids compete? What information will they have? I have a smart meter in my house. I can't access the data. We need to understand the possibilities. I challenge this community to think about how we can take advantage of it and do it in an area where we can see the innovation right before our eyes by inspiring our youngsters. We've teamed up with the National Science Teachers Association to organize this program over the summer months so that it can go live in the fall. I strongly encourage your active participation, and I'm keen to see the great results that will come out of this effort. But it's just one of 3 ways I believe we can harness the creativity and entrepreneurial spirit of the American people to solve these big problems. And these are the 3 levers that I'm using to help reinforce the thesis that today is the best time to be an energy innovator. A reminder of the 3, and I will wrap with your questions. Number 1, as I alluded to earlier, we are unleashing market opportunities through data.gov. We have over 120 energy-related data sets and much more to come. If we're holding data that you want, click on the button that says Request for Data on data.gov, and we'll be right on it. If you think there's opportunities for us to demonstrate more collaboration in this spirit by other tools, let us know and we'll have at it. Second, on the other side of this challenge business is the notion that we in Washington are thinking of ourselves in a sense as a lean startup. With due respect to my dear friend Eric Ries, who's been leading this movement on lean startups, we've been trying to embody the principles of small 3 to 5 person teams that come together to knock out opportunities, not in 2 years or budget cycles or authorization cycles, but in 90 days so that we can achieve dramatic opportunities. This government startup culture is what's powered ARPA-E. The best and the brightest have been recruited. I challenge any of you to look at the resumes of the folks we've been bringing into ARPA-E, starting at the top with Arun Majumdar. These are legitimate, genuine rock stars. People trust their judgment to frame the right questions and to put our research dollars to work. It's about the people and our ability to recruit top talent. And that's why the president has called on this emphasized focus on technology, data, and innovation, and why you're seeing a proliferation of these new entrepreneurial positions in federal agencies, these chief technology officers that are innovators. And this last piece, the piece that I've been highlighting around home energy, is one of a number of areas where we are tapping into Clay Shirky's notion of a cognitive surplus. You and I have excess brain power. Some of us put it to work on Wikipedia to improve encyclopedic entries. How many of you might put your cognitive surplus to work to help us accelerate the pace of change in the smart grid? That's why we've engaged entrepreneurs as problem solvers through platforms like challenge.gov, and why you've seen the Secretary take on an opportunity like launching the America's Home Education Challenge, so that we can, in fact, tap into that competitive and exciting entrepreneurial spirit of the American people. This is how we roll. This is what we do. Thank you so much for your time, and I look forward to your questions.